For the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
It's my understanding there is no public comment, so we'll move into the buildings and ground agenda. And I believe we have Fidevia to give us a presentation, updated information on athletic fields. So go ahead. How you doing?
Hi. Thank you for having me. We've been working quite a bit on the stadium, different options, going over there, going through the bleacher reports from 2019, and we've put some suggestions and some options up to view. I'll start with the first line item. This is actually like a transfer of budget, I'll say. This 4 million was this is required because of the high school, redoing your baseball field and then making a new field hockey fields. This will get better participation having this on the stadium project than as part of the high school, we feel. So we just essentially transferred that money over to here. So that came off your high school budget and goes on to here. And then it's been recommended for an additional parking lot over by those fields. So we got with ELA and we priced up a 200 space parking lot. Again, we can adjust this as we go through, but it gave us a starting point. As part of the high school construction, the maintenance building also goes. So we put together a pole building price to meet what Randy and Kim needed. And that includes, site work associated with it. Again, that's another item that's triggered by the high school construction. Then we get into the press box. Now, this is the current visitor press box. I know there's
just a question. I'm familiar with pole buildings for personal, and it just seems like a lot of money for that size. Am I looking at that wrong, or is this just a guesstimate at this point?
Well, not really. A lot of districts, we've had a lot out for bid this year.
Okay.
Because of what you were doing with it, the thing that bumps it up the most is they wanted it heated. So now you're insulating panels, insulating walls, and then
Okay.
also putting HVAC in it. We also figure a thicker slab than what you would do residentially.
Okay,
know.
so it's not just a pole building, it's insulated, HVAC system, electric. It's more than just a conventional, just bare bones pole building.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, but we did stick with the pole building to still keep the price down. And that has these numbers, the sheet got too messy when I tried to break it all out. So these numbers, some of these numbers look pretty big, but keep in mind that's including site work. That's including all your soft costs, your architectural engineering fees. At this point in the stage, it's all lumped in that one number. So it does get you.
Is that price per square foot pretty competitive? Is it typical what you've seen with everything that's been added?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. For what you're looking for. And again, the insulated panels, insulated roof, the HVAC system, required electric service, it does bump it up a bit.
So it's 11,000 square foot. What does that turn out to be? What size is that roughly?
It matches the size that you have roughly. It's like 210 by 50, I think it is.
That's extremely high price.
Yeah. I think it comes out to like 160 a square foot. Yeah.
163 square foot. I just did that number, but that's high.
Yeah, well, but we don't know exactly yet how much site work is related to that. We just had a bid opening on a similar size building for another district. That came in at like 110. Keep in mind, prevailing wage puts another 30 to 40%. That came in at 110 and it had no HVAC, only had simple electric, couple ceiling fans. And that was for a district not that far from here. So, and I will say with a caveat, at this early stage, I'd rather start out a little high and not have to keep coming back to you guys saying, oh, I forgot to add for site work. I forgot to add for stormwater, until a design starts to take place.
Understood. And just to be clear, it's because the building back over here just goes away. So all of the equipment, all of that, plus over by the barn area needs to be relocated. as a result of, which is why it's kind of the domino effect all the way through this.
Yeah, so we matched the size, because talking to Randy and Kim, that was sufficient size. They didn't, we didn't upsize it at all. Then we get into the press box. So this is the visitor press box. Okay, has the old masonry structure, an old bathroom with the press box on top of it. So we're demoing out the press box, that entire structure, that entire masonry structure. We're also demoing out the small building right behind there. It was like a food. Yeah, that's what it showed up on the old drawings as.
Right, right. It's no longer used for that. It's actually, right now it's used for storage.
Yeah, so we included removal of that and then a pre-engineered press box that would just go in on stilts. Newer, more modern. And then we went through the 2019 report from Stadium Solutions, and we took the information we had and we did our best to price the different deficiencies to bring the bleachers up to current code. That, I'm hoping that number is a little higher than it needs to be, but there's a lot of little components to it. Got to bring it up ADA wise, clearance with the riser height. There's quite a bit of work there. And then we did the same thing with the home press box. Now the home press box, we found the press box to actually be in pretty good shape. It just needs finishes, but the structure itself seemed pretty well. So literally it's paint, floors, and like a mini split system, you know. Everything else seemed pretty decent with it. And probably could do a roof for that too, you know, with a new membrane over top of it and extend its life. And then the same thing, those bleachers are a little smaller and needed a little bit less work, what we deemed to meet code. So that price came down a little bit.
So when you say upgrade bleachers, what does that mean? What are we talking? I mean, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, it's
to upgrade
ramps up to code, it's handrails. And one of the biggest things was your gaps between like your risers and your bottoms in a lot of areas no longer meet current code. And what they're gonna do is when you get over to the stadium and you start doing other work, you know how code officials work. They want you to bring everything up to current code.
Right, but if we're not replacing the bleachers, will that be the case? I mean, I understand that if we decide to replace the bleachers, that we have to meet current code. But the bleachers, as far as I know, are very functional. And I was over there for several games this fall. They don't appear to be unsafe. They don't appear to be rickety. They appear to be in pretty good shape. If we simply do the things that we have to do, like the press box, are we then going to be required to replace the bleachers?
If I was a gambling man, I'd say yes. Now,
Why?
some of it,
What's the rationale for that conclusion?
well, because every time that your bleachers are looked at, and your code official may also require, because I think the last time was 2019. So the code of it really, sometimes in a condition like that, it can come down to your inspector. And if he asks for that paperwork and sees they haven't been inspected for 6 years.
But I thought there was a grandfathering. I mean, there's a lot of things that are out of code, but you're not required to fix them until you replace them, is my understanding. I mean,
Well, they've tightened that up over the years, though. As soon as you go into an area, be it a building or a series of buildings, as soon as you upgrade to a certain percentage, and I don't know, Mike Kelly can speak to it a lot better to me. I think it's right around 50%. As soon as you touch about 50%, they most often will push you to at least do ADA upgrades, which is a big part of the issue with the bleachers.
I'm, the words matter here. You're saying push. That might be their preference, but there's a difference between someone having a preference and there being a legal requirement that it be done. So, I mean, which is it?
Well, when I say push you, it would then become a legal requirement. A code official, a building inspector can very easily hold up a certificate of occupancy if he feels like something needs to be brought up to code and it's not. Now, I'm not saying that you march forward and automatically assume that you have to do those things. If you guys are comfortable with your bleachers, We just priced up what we think it would cost based on that 2019 deficiency report.
That's helpful. The other question I have is the renovation for the concession stand and bathhouse. How much of this, it looks like you have almost $2 million budgeted for that. How much of that is the concession stand versus the restroom facilities there?
So what I did there is I don't know who's running it. Could you
Mike,
scroll
can you
down?
scroll down?
So we can see the rest of that?
Pardon me?
Okay.
Yeah.
To the bottom. Okay, so this one here includes, yes, it includes that existing bathhouse / concession. Again, that's a similar situation that nothing in there is ADA. And then we looked at, as an option, either doing an addition or doing a smaller standalone building, which was shown in a study I believe Crabtree did for you guys a couple years ago. It showed expanding your existing bathhouse into an expanded concession and remodeling that, getting rid of those old bathrooms and putting a small bathhouse right outside the fence. So that additions number would cover that.
Okay.
If that is a direction.
What I'm struggling with is the concession stand actually seems pretty adequate, right? I mean, we have how many home games a year? 5, 6 home games a year?
Well, we have plenty of other athletic events, soccer.
Okay. So how many events are held in there each year where we have a staffed functioning concession stand?
I don't know. Concession stand open for soccer.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay, so how many a year are we talking?
The weekend?
It's possible in the fall, you're looking at least once or twice a weekend. You get into the spring, you're probably looking every third weekend, depending on events.
It's open for lacrosse games.
So
Probably 30.
I'd say probably more than that.
Yeah, I would say rough, that would be on low balling. 30 would probably be low balling.
30 a year?
That would be the low end of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how much revenue do we generate in concessions for each
That
of those?
I don't know. That would be something for the
Yeah.
varsity club.
I guess where
runs
I'm
that.
going with this is a renovated concession stand a must-have or a nice-to-have? And if it's a nice-to-have, what's the payback on incremental concession revenue as a result of spending $1 million to upgrade the current facility?
I guess my other question is, how much just to level that with something new? Could it be less expensive? Because those bathrooms are atrocious. They're an embarrassment, in my opinion, to the district. The concession stand's okay, but that whole building is old, a lot of
It
issues.
is.
If we leveled that thing and just put something brand new, could new construction be cheaper than this?
It wouldn't be cheaper, but it wouldn't be the spread. Like in the addition,
You say it would or would not be cheaper?
it would not be cheaper, but it wouldn't be the spread of what I've shown because the addition there that I've shown is actually a standalone building, which would require its own site work. If your question is, if we were to raise that building and put one right in its spot, it would be somewhere in between the renovation and new number.
Could we get that number?
Yeah, for example, if you were gonna literally try and reuse that slab,
Right.
yeah, because that building's rough.
Yeah, that's,
That building is
the
really rough.
restrooms are 1960s,
Mhm.
you know?
We kind of put these in what we felt was an order of priority, and here we are.
Understood.
At the last
Understood.
one.
And these are ballpark numbers.
Yeah.
They're not exact to the dollar. But I'm just wondering if we get a cost of a new one, if it's not that much more, probably gonna look better, be more functional and last longer.
Yeah, and the other thing in this, I'll just mention, I tried to, is the little ticket booth and then also repointing of and cleaning of all the masonry items there. You have a retaining wall, you have a little arch, just because that stuff is, it needs a little maintenance work. So that's also thrown into that last pot.
I got you.
The field, if I could talk about the field house for a minute. that also, that's really dated and is not up to ADA at all. So we separated trying to renovate that building, but then there's been discussions about a desire to have a training room down there by the site and also possibly have some bathrooms over on that side if that becomes your home side. So we priced a small addition to that field house as an option.
And that piece, just for the board's awareness, is we're working through the design part of the high school. The request for the trainer space is a result of where the trainer space in the high school can be located. Because currently, as we're working through it, there is no exterior entrance and exit to be able to get to facilities outside quicker. If there was something over in that area where the fields are, we wouldn't need that exterior entrance and exit. So while it's down on the list in terms of from a priority standpoint, it does have a potential to hinge, the design side of it, if we're not able to come up with some option to have some type of training facility or room out by the stadium.
So are we looking at the option of switching the home and the away sides? Is that what I heard?
I believe so. But there's
So the
been,
field house would then be right close to the home side.
Right.
That kind of.
yes, and those bleachers, you have more seating on that side, and that side would end up, with this plan, would end up having the new press box.
And the bleachers are bigger on the visiting side?
Oh, you have overall more seating, yeah.
Oh,
They're a lot wider. They don't go
Okay.
up quite as high, but you do have a bit more seating on the visitor side. Which is an issue, as I understand, on your home side.
Correct.
You're short. You don't have room for the band and the parents and, yeah.
Any more questions?
Mrs. Hall, you probably have access to those numbers. What kind of revenue are we getting from concessions? I'm sorry, can you?
In, I
Money
see if I
goes to
can find
varsity
it.
club, doesn't it?
It does go through the
Yes,
varsity club and then
It
it goes
doesn't
back
come
to
to
the
us.
student.
It goes to varsity
Yeah.
club.
Right, but we do the student,
still
we do have the student
bank it
accounts.
through their accounts. don't
Correct.
we?
Yes,
Right.
So you have access to those account balances.
yes,
Okay.
yeah. No, it's good.
Grant, there's no ROI on that. I mean, just common sense would tell you that there's no way that investment in a typical
That's-
business, you would look for ROI. This is not an ROI business situation. It's an amenity that we
Well-
provide to the students
I-
as a way to raise funds.
That's my point, okay? I can absolutely understand that things that are core to our athletic competition, things like that, need to be nice, and we need to be investing in, because that's what we do. But concession revenue is an ancillary business that there should be some question about how much we're spending versus what we're getting back. I'm not suggesting that we don't have concession stands. I'm suggesting that spending $1 million or $2 million on something that generates $1,000 in income, less than 30 times a year, that gets challenging.
If you're looking at it from a purely financial situation, none of it makes sense related to even having a concession stand. I think you have to look at it through a different lens when you're looking at this situation.
I look through it through the lens of trying to be good stewards of the taxpayers' money.
No, and that's
While
fair.
Still doing our core educational function.
Yeah, I agree. I think it would be different if there were some other options there, but I think it would be probably difficult to go at this from a purely financial standpoint and just eliminate it, or maybe there's a compromise somewhere in between there as we work through it.
And if you go to the minutes of the January regular meeting, you can see the balance in the varsity clubs.
I'm sorry, Ms. Esselman.
You can find the varsity club's balance in the January regular minutes.
The financial items.
Oh, thank you. What is it? You obviously just looked it up. What is it?
The balance as of, it's a 7/1/2024. I'm not always in this document, says 13,000-ish.
But
there's-
so
Yeah.
that's their balance. So I just pulled a quick report. Their expenditures so far this year have been 37,000. So it's definitely more than that. I don't have a report already written to pull their.
Thank you.
So I would say, as Justin was saying, athletics are a big thing at Hempfield. We do very well. And I think as far as our fields and our bleachers, our restrooms at the facility, are not up to par. A lot of the schools that aren't as good as us athletically. So athletics is important. We don't want to be crazy. The amount of money we spend, we got to be careful. But there's some improvements, I think, that are warranted between there was something about lighting, stadium lighting, the parking lot, the field house, the restrooms are an embarrassment, in my opinion. Some of those things for not excessive amount of money can help make our facilities much nicer. And there's a lot of events. We have the track and field league meet. I think we have the band festivals there. There's a lot of traffic. There's a lot of
traffic.
events.
Mr. Graham, if you could just go back to the top, I just want to make sure everyone's clear. So when we look at the baseball, that's not only baseball, it's softball, field hockey field moving as a result of the baseball field potentially going over there in that parking lot, and the maintenance. Those things are a direct domino effect of a high school project. The reason why this is all lumped together, just to refresh everyone and for those who are listening, is because we can do things differently in terms of getting bids and putting out a project spec by lumping those fields into work at the stadium, and that could help save the district dollars. So what you have there, starting with the current visitor press box and down, while it is kind of a menu and you can kind of pick and choose, we did kind of rank them in order of from a priority standpoint, just based on the needs. But collectively, if we were to try and put something out to kind of see what this could potentially cost, we would just need to have some conversation, and we will be having conversations in the coming weeks, starting with our building and grounds committee members and then coming back to the full board around the fields, what's needed for the fields, and then potentially some other pieces to kind of pull together to bring something back to the board to say, okay, if there's interest and support, we can then put it out to secure pricing to kind of see what that could look like. But we wanted to kind of bring this together as John Michael with Fidevia and the team working with ELA and KCBA through all of this, is trying to kind of work on multiple things, but this is definitely something that's going to have to happen first as a result of something from the high school.
So in all reality, it's only $8 million roughly that doesn't have it separate from the high school. The other $6 million is impact from the high school project.
That is correct.
So it's really only $8 million we're talking about for the school.
8 to 9. Yeah.
Yes.
Roughly.
Correct.
And just 2 quick points. So when we price it up this way, we don't know if you're going to take 1 or you're going to take 4. So we look at each one as a standalone, a la carte, so that those numbers hold up. If the board comes back and says, we're going to do the top 4, we'll relook at that, because now you get some economies of scale, right? Instead of building 1 building, they're with the same equipment already on site, they're building 2 or 3 possibly. So, and I think that would be a noticeable jump. The other thing I just want to point out, because I'm doing it to all the boards I speak at, is over the past week and a half, we've got several notifications about steel and aluminum prices going up starting in March. So we don't know what the way they play a game. Being in this business my whole life, they play a game. They say we're going to go up 25%. They don't. They go up 5%. They see what their competition does. Maybe the competition goes up 8. It may come back down. You don't have a lot of steel here. Certainly if aluminum would go up a big jump like that, that would be significant if we do have to do something with the bleachers. But in terms of the high school, it is something we're really watching. It could impact going forward.
I just have one comment. And initially, this is my initial thought, that if we're going to do the work on this and put the energy and time into this, that we should just take the leap and make the thing ADA compliant. I know, you push back on that a little bit, Mr. Keener, but I think when you're doing a project of this magnitude, it makes sense to bring it up to code.
One, it's a good point, but there is sometimes a compromise too. If they don't make you do it, if they don't make you bring the entire bleacher section up, you could still do the right thing, put a ramp, a landing, spend a lot less money and make those provisions in one section. We've seen a lot of districts do that if they're not forced into.
Then maybe I'm
Fixing
confused
the
about
whole-
what you're recommending here, because you're talking about price per linear foot. That suggested to me replacing all the bleachers. I'm not disputing that we should put railings in, okay? what I'm saying is ripping up perfectly good bleachers just because we're putting railings in.
No,
So maybe
Oh,
I'm
no,
misunderstanding.
it's not replacing. It's the per foot price is just the way we work it out based on what their needs were. And like you have gaps that are too big, so aluminum has to be made and put in. Like you can't have a gap more than I believe 4 inches and some of yours are 6 or 7. So it is a linear foot thing when we price it up because we have to have aluminum made to fill those gaps in.
You're just filling the gaps, not replacing all of them.
Right, what he's saying is we're not replacing the bleachers. We would bring the current bleachers that we have up to code. And those are the prices that that the costs that reflect bringing the bleachers to code.
Yeah, you'd be $1 million or more to replace them. Each side.
Okay, any further questions? Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I
Thank you.
do have a quick question.
Go
Um,
ahead.
Just what kind of timeline are we looking at and when would this need to be approved in order to get it into the proper sequence of the things that need to be done? Say the baseball fields, when they need to be laid out and ready and mature enough to be used the following year kind of thing.
While he's thinking, I can answer some of those questions.
Okay.
So we're gonna be having a meeting in the next coming couple of weeks. I'm waiting for dates from KCBA, ELA, and other individuals who need to be part of that. I'll be sending it out to the building and ground committee members so we can start having those conversations around things like the fields and whatnot to be able to bring back to the full board. So that we can then say, here's what's in a sense has been reviewed, recommended. If the full board is in support of that, then we would start to get that out. What we've heard at this point is if we can get things started this summer, particularly with the fields, it will give enough time to have 2 growing seasons. with
Right.
What's been
'cause
shared, right?
We essentially have 2 years worth of use for the varsity baseball field, okay? But we need to get the new field started sooner rather than later, just so that we can have it's not being used and we have time to establish grass and so forth.
So we could say we wanted to go ahead with, say, randomly 5 out of the 8 or whatever things that are on there, but just start baseball fields for this summer and then get the bids for the rest of the things to begin in a future season or cycle.
Correct.
They
yeah.
wouldn't all go into,
Right, so what what we would do is it'll be better pricing if we determine that what things we're going to do, the more things we're going to
Sure.
do, we're going to get better pricing.
Mhm.
And so it doesn't necessarily mean that it'll all be done at one time kind of thing. It'll be put into a bid packet
Mhm.
and then we'll begin the bid packet, but it'll be whatever contractor is going to do it will give us better pricing if we know off the top what it is we're going to include in that bid packet.
Thanks.
Just one other question. I seem to remember if we move the baseball field, we're building new. Does that price also include upgrading the softball field?
Yes.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
just
And-
wasn't mentioned.
We put a little, I met with Mike Kelly and we left a little money in for, dugouts, backstop. Made small bleachers, not knowing exactly yet what that might need.
So we're not putting sky boxes around.
Right.
I know that's the football
Yeah.
stadium.
And no, yeah, like Kim said, there's no turf in that price either. That's grass. You gotta give it
That's right,
time.
Gotta keep grass.
Yeah.
It makes the button with sky boxes around.
Yeah.
All right, any further questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
So our next item is summer projects update.
Yes.
Mr. James?
So before we leave the baseball field, I wanted to let all of you know, I had reported to you before that we have a possible fix for the current varsity boys baseball field scoreboard. It has been repaired. It is working. So we do have, and that is the current board as it exists right now. It is working. So we won't need to at this point.
Worked out.
Yes, it did.
How much did it cost, do you know?
I think it was like $1,700.
Good.
Yeah, yeah. So,
Thank you.
so it is working. So yes, good news. So, Yes, if we can move on to the roof restorations. So if you recall last month, Randy from YTI was here and he was here to explain to you about their company, what restoration, what's involved in roof restorations and the possibility of us using their company to do roof restorations on Landisville Primary Center and the Landisville Middle School. So what he has done in over the last several months is he has gone to both of those buildings. Their company has gone to both of those buildings. They have evaluated those roofs and determined that they are prime subjects for a roof restoration. They have gone out using their product. They have gone out to the companies that you see listed there and gotten a cost or a proposal for the roof restoration from those companies. That would be the cost for Landisville Middle School. As you can see, Halk Services is the lower bid. So that would be the company that would be the one we would go with in this case. The next one is the Landisville Primary Center, same contractors gave the same proposals and so forth. Hauk was also the low bid on for the Landisville Primary Center. So basically what we would be doing here, and this is a high level of what we would be looking at, is this would include a 30-year warranty for the roofs. When we talk about the roofs warranty, I would contact, if we had any problems with the roofs, any leakage, I would contact YTI directly. They would come out and they personally would take care of the roofs, not the contractors that installed the restored roof. This would include removal of any area of the roof that needed replaced. This would take out any damaged insulation. And over these last several weeks, they have scanned and evaluated both roofs to determine what areas of both roofs need to be taken. The whole roof needs to come out, and they've already scanned that. They do have a little bit extra in their bid in case, because you never know, once you start taking out it, you may need to take out a little bit more. So they do have a little bit of extra, shall we call it fluff in there, so that in case we have to take out more, we can do that. But this will include them taking out any damaged roof and replacing that, and then doing the recoating on the roof, as well as drains in the roof. They will move drains either up or down. Right now, there's a lot of issues with the level of the drains. A lot of them have sunk over the years, and so they need to be brought up so that they can create the proper drainage. Right now, you'll find after it rains, there's a river of water, but it doesn't lead to the drain. So they have to create and repair those drainage issues so that the drains are all draining properly. This would also include the roof level masonry work that would be done. All of that masonry work would be done by Whitmer Company. Then that would take care of just the roof level masonry that needs repaired. This is a lot of things where repointing is needed. They have cracking of some of the bricks, that sort of thing. This would take care of those issues. And then it would also take care of any flashing issues. In fact, there's a lot of flashing that will be taken off and replaced through this. So that's the high level of the things that we would do. This work would be done over the summer. There is a possibility that because they're going to be doing both of the roofs, they may not get completed by summer, but what they have left to do would be nothing that would be a problem to be done, still done while students are in the building. Everything, any crane work, any the noisy work of moving the drains up and down and things like that, that would all be done during the summer. But we built in that possibility that we could have to go past summer.
Couple questions.
Mhm.
What was the name of this product again? This gentleman? Some kind of coating, right?
Yes, it's a coating. The company is YTI. Okay. It's a coating that, and it's for lack of a better, it's a very thick, heavy membrane that goes over the entire roof. There's no seams and things like that. It's an entire membrane. Within the membrane, there is also an insulation that you find if you look at the side from the membrane from the side. It also will have an insulation in there.
So are these, I believe with schools, and government, state, they can't do a not to exceed, it's a lump sum total price for each project? Is it a not to exceed, these bids
Yes,
here?
yes,
Not to
they-
exceed,
Yes, that is what he
But-
explained to me there. He said if they get up there and they find that there is more damage than what they initially thought there was, he said the cost is what the cost is.
is if it comes in less, do we get any savings?
Yes,
Okay, so this is a kind of not to exceed, some type of estimate?
but with potential of, they build that, as I referred to it, as a fluff in there
Okay.
so that they have it, and I'm not having to come back to you and ask for a change order or something
but you
like
could
that.
Get less.
Yeah, correct.
Okay, so my other question is, shouldn't there be a benefit by doing both projects, they're next to each other, that we get a plus, some additional savings of doing both projects? Are they doing them at the same time?
Yes, they would be doing them at the same time. And that is another thing I have checked since came in for the low bid for both of those buildings.
Yeah.
I have asked the question, are they able to do they have enough manpower to do both of those roofs at that time, at the same time during the time frame that we've allotted? And they have stated, Hauck has stated that they do.
So my question is though, since they're mobilizing, they're probably using the same crews, shouldn't there be a discount by doing both projects together, but they're so close to each other?
And I'm told that they figured that into the pricing
Okay.
as they figured out the costs of everything, because
Okay.
they're ordering more product, therefore being able to get it at a lower price. And that has been figured into their costs.
So this is based on doing both projects. We just
Correct.
pick one of them, the price would go up.
Most likely,
Okay.
yes.
So
I
there
didn't
was
ask that
savings.
question.
How would they
Yeah.
bid? Will they bid as one integrated project or two separate projects?
They're bid as two separate projects with the thought that they'll be done at the same time.
So there is savings in there for doing both together.
Yes, yes. And just as a reminder, this is also tied to the grant that we have received from the state.
Yeah, I'm
Or that
not
we'll
totally,
receive.
I mean, not to be difficult, but I'm not totally convinced if they weren't bid together that we necessarily got the benefit of both of them being bid under one group. If they were separately put out for RFP,
Exactly.
you would have got bids on that separately. It just so happens, I mean, we could have ended up with two different companies that came in with a low bid on each of those different projects. I'm not so convinced we got the benefit of that without truly understanding if they were bid separately and or together.
Do we have enough time to rebid both together?
But wait, it was one RFP that asked for pricing on two different roofs. It wasn't like they weren't put out separate.
Yeah.
Right.
It was an RFP, yes, it was.
Right, but that's not the
That's-
question. The question is,
No, that wasn't
did
the
they
statement.
issue separate bids for each project? Right?
So they were asked to price the project separately, to give a price for LPC and a price for LMS.
So-
They were on the same, yeah, and if they were on the same,
To
yeah, we're good if it was on the same RFP.
Yep.
In my
Yes.
opinion, that answers my question.
Yes,
Yes.
yeah. We have to, for accounting purposes, we have to, because it's two different buildings, we have to have them split out what the cost is for each building.
But it was based on getting both jobs.
Yes,
So there would have been a chance, the two, if a vendor was high on one and low on the other, it might have still been lower in the total, both jobs, but it looks like Hal was low on both of them, so there's no question. See what I'm saying? How could have been like number 4, and then maybe David Main's Associates, their total cost of both of them could have been lower. We would have picked them, but Hal came in low on both of them.
right.
I'm sorry, I wasn't here for the presentation. There's two questions I have. One, it looks like it adds a lot of weight to the roof. And they checked all that engineer wise?
Yes.
And the other thing is, it says that it needs regular maintenance. Do we know what that regular maintenance is gonna be on that product and what that cost is gonna be per year? Is that different than another type of roof?
So much of the regular maintenance will be done by our staff, and as far as assessing the roof for any sort of damage and things like that. And then if we find that, then we bring them back in, and that's part of the warranty then.
And that
So-
was talked about in the meeting. And so that company will work with our team to show them exactly what needs to be done. And then while they can clear drains and remove things, it has to be reported to the company doing the work because they then have to come out and
But
fix.
all the joints and all that stuff, they're responsible for that 30 years.
Yes.
So when do we need to approve this to get it done this summer? I assuming is the goal.
Right, so the plan is that we would have this on the agenda for the March. Mhm. Yes.
Any
Yes, maybe
further,
since I'm
any further questions?
just with that, does anyone have a problem with this being on the March agenda? To approve?
Okay, any further questions on the roofing? Go ahead and proceed to the other projects.
More, the fuel, you can bring that up. No, below. Mhm. So the next item I wanted to talk to you about is the fuel station, okay? We put this out to bid. More Engineering put the bid packet together. They put this out to bid. The result was the following three. And we, actually, if you move on to the next slide, you can see it a little bit bigger. Yeah, the next page, sorry. The three bids that you see are the three bidders that submitted bids for this. What you're looking at there is the base bid in the first column there. The base bid is for the replacement of the fuel tanks, the pumps, the fencing around there. That would be included with that would be the price to include a 4,000 gallon gas tank. We asked them to also give us pricing if we were to go with a 2,000 gallon gas tank. So that alternate column, the alternate bid number 1, you're seeing a deduct there. If we were to not go with the 4,000 gallon tank, that would be the deduct that we would get back from the base bid to go with the smaller 2,000 gallon tank. And then the other 2 columns that you're seeing there for the unit price 1 and 2, that is in the event that they have to pump any fuel out of the existing tanks that are there. That would be the per gallon price if they have to. They've included, I think it's 100 gallons. Yes, 100 gallon allowance. But if there's more than 100 gallons, that would be the unit price that they would charge us for pumping any fuel, whether it be gas or diesel, out of the existing tanks and for disposal of those.
What about the diesel tank? What size is that?
500 gallon,
What do we have now?
500 gallon.
And that's included in that 324.
Yes,
number.
yes, that
So
is
it's
for both.
tanks. Okay.
Yes, that's for both gas and diesel.
And that's all the reconcreting and everything else. that
Yes.
Completed the project.
Yes. For the pad that they sit on.
Right.
Yes. Sorry, just wanted to clarify.
And Mr. James, I know we talked about this before, but if you could refresh our memories on what the savings and fuel delivery will be as a result of the larger tanks. In other words, the fact that Sheets or whomever we buy the fuel from won't have to come as often.
Correct.
And I think there's going to be some savings there. If you could
Yes.
Remind us of that.
Correct. There is going to be some savings there per gallon if they have less deliveries that they're having to make. I think off the top of my head, it was like, yeah, something like, I think it was like 5 cents a gallon savings if they're doing less, if I recall correctly.
How many gallons do we use a year?
I'm sorry?
How many gallons do we use a year?
Yeah, we'd have to look
You
that.
said about 500 gallons a week on average. So if you do the math, it's probably going to get you close.
Yes. And we just ran into a situation week and a half, 2 weeks ago, where we actually did not miss a delivery. We get deliveries every day. We did not miss a delivery, but we ran out of fuel. And that was because, that was simply a difference between, the one day they delivered in the morning and then the next day they didn't deliver till the afternoon. And so we ran out of fuel in there.
$25 a week, about $1,300 a year. Summer is probably less, so a little over $1,000 a year saving.
This,
That might even be low at 500. I recall it might even be more than 500 a week. It might be closer to 500 a day from what I understand.
500 a day.
Yeah, if I recall. Is that right, Mrs. James? If you're filling up every day, I don't know how many gallon you're putting in there, but it might be more than 500 a week.
Might be.
Anyway, there's savings there.
Five,
Yes.
$7,000.
They were willing to renegotiate the contract with us based on the larger volume
Yes.
deliveries. Because I looked at the contract and I recall it was not due to be updated. But I think you had a conversation with the contractor.
So I have it in writing that they'll
Yeah,
drop.
and they're
the,
gonna drop it
the
and we
delivery
have that
by
in
5 cents.
writing. So we will incur some savings. I don't know what the exact number is gonna be, but
Mr. James, do you have that slide from a couple months ago? Because I think there was another tranche of savings from like, not just the cost per gallon, but wasn't there a per delivery cost? And since we're not getting it delivered as often.
That's what the savings is. So we pay rack rate plus 22 cents right now. It would drop to rack plus to 17 cents, so 5 cents a
Say
gallon.
that again?
So there's a rack rate, which is what the fuel costs.
Yeah.
And then the delivery is right now 22 cents a gallon. They would drop it to 17 if we have bigger tanks because they're coming less often. So that's the same thing we're talking about here.
That's the 5 cents.
That's the 5 cents. Yep.
So probably 5,000-7,000 a year. So, but reality is the tanks are in horrible condition.
okay.
The pumps aren't working. We have to do
Needs to be
something.
done.
It's not an ROI type project. It's
Needs to be
and
done.
it's a need. It's a necessity. Any questions on the fuel tanks?
Same question, up for bid or up for approval in
In,
March?
yes, yes, yeah, all of these that I'm presenting are the same. Yeah.
Yay.
Okay, yeah, we,
Paving and concrete? I'm sorry.
she just pulled up the previous, presentation and it was 67,569 gallons that we use annually. So.
Yes, it's about 3,500 top of my head. All right,
And you
and
would-
I think paving projects was your other item?
Mrs.
Okay.
James, could I just interrupt and ask you one more question?
Mhm.
Which one is your preference, the 4,000 or the 2,000 tank?
Well,
If you,
I
in
feel
an
like
ideal world.
to be safe, we should go with the 4,000 gallon to make sure that we have safety versus going with the 2,000. I feel like the 4,000 will allow us growth
Mhm.
where the 2,000 may not.
Okay,
And for the difference in price
Mhm.
that you're seeing there, you need to
Yeah,
look at
yeah,
that.
right, it is very,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the discount is based upon going with a 4,000 gallon tank.
Yes, if we go with if we go with the 2,000 gallon tank.
I don't know what it's gonna be. No, the 5 cent.
Oh,
discount
yes,
delivery
yes,
is based on a
yes,
4,000
absolutely.
gallon tank.
Yeah,
okay, thank you.
No. I see what you're saying. Yeah. So this, we also, sorry, we also we'll be working on paving and concrete again this year as we have in the past. The locations for paving and concrete are a drive that takes you from the existing Mountville Elementary and takes you behind the old Mountville Elementary. There is a drive there that is still owned by the school district. So there would be work that would be done to that. There would be work to be done on the parking lot at Landisville Middle School and Centerville Middle School, as well as there is an area on the back of this parking lot that is around the drain that has sunk a bit, and we need to have that worked on. So those are the general areas that this work would include. What you're looking at here is the base bid. We had six contractors reply to the RFP that we put out there. And they're all listed there. The low bid is SM Johns and Company. That would be the company that would be the suggested bidder. The items that you're looking at there is, as I mentioned, the base bid is listed on there. And then you're going to see some allowance in the event that we would have something unexpected come up. And also the alternates that you see there. So alternate 1 and 2. So for 19,000 and 38,000, those items are going to be a wash. Those items are an area on, I had mentioned the drive from excuse me, I mentioned the drive coming from behind Old Mountville Elementary. There are sides of that drive on either side that are not owned by us, but are owned by the borough. And it made sense to them. They said, if you're going to redo that drive, can we be notified? And we want to be part of that. They'll get a cheaper price to be part of that, but they will reimburse us. We will get a commitment letter from them. If they decide that that is something that they want to do, they'll get a commitment letter from them. So those two line items will be a complete wash for the school district. The alternate 4 on there is for the fueling station. So that is items that will be in the parking lot of the in front of the fueling station. There's the concrete pad that would be in front of there. They would do some excavating work. They would also run new conduits that run the fuel station that would run from the maintenance shop to the fueling stations. So we put them in there as an alternate. Should we decide that we're not going to do the fueling stations, then obviously we wouldn't choose those items to be included in the process or in the purchase order. The pricing that you see below there, which is the schedule of values, those items there would be if we decide to do any additional work that wasn't as part of the purchase or excuse me, wasn't part of the original RFP. Those are the costs that we would be charged for whatever it is we decided to do extra. We ask them to give us those costs from the get-go in the event that we decide to add something on. That would however have to go to a change order or have to come to the board if we were to decide to do something like that.
Who did we use last year?
It
for-
was this company,
Same company?
SM
They did a good-
Dons.
They did a
Yes.
good job for us?
Yes.
Okay. Questions on this work? And this would also be approved in March,
Yes.
all 3 of these things? Okay.
Yes.
Any additional questions, comments? All right, so I believe that concludes any buildings and grounds. Do we want to take a short 5-minute break?
I'd rather just keep rolling, but
Okay, let's
I'd
keep
like to
rolling.
to the group. All right, 5-minute break.
6 o'clock. We'll resume.
See you back in a few.
Project.
start the finance committee meeting, and we're going to start off with a presentation from Mrs. Hall and a budget update. And it's related to our expenditures. And this is a draft. Remember, this is not final, so take that for what it's worth.
Thank you. So as Mr. Wogomuth said, this is our first pass at looking at expenditures. We spent the better part of the last 2 months building every account code, and we have tens of thousands of account codes in this budget. So this is our first look at the expenditures all rolled up. And back in January, Mr. Burmercy presented to you the first pass at revenues. So you've seen that. Since then, next slide, the governor has done his budget address, and just some highlights of what we could potentially receive is that there's 75 million for basic ed, 181,000 proposed for Hempfield, 40 million in special ed funding, 152 proposed for Hempfield, and then 526 million in the adequacy funds, and we would get 680,000. And just a note on that, 680 is what we got last year, and we were provided clarification that 680 rolls into our base, ready to learn adequacy, and then we would get an additional 680 on top of that. So I have revised the revenue projections to include that 680, so they'll look a little different than they did in January. So just, that was actually some really good news for us that is kind of ongoing. And then additionally, there's going to be money for school facility improvement grants. We were lucky enough to be chosen this time. We will certainly apply again. I don't know that we will get chosen again, but anything that's available, we will apply since we have so much work to do here. And then there's 100 million in for physical and mental health targeted grants via the PCCD. So just some highlights. We don't, like, of course, we don't budget any of that because we don't know generally or ever in my time here, what we're going to have until after the budget is due to PDE. So we budget flat year over year, just to give you an idea for revenue purposes. Next slide. So how it's looking right now is we are sitting at a $2.4 million deficit. It's about a 2.63% tax increase. Now that is our first pass. There's some work that we are still going to do. Some things may go down, some things may go up. We are still working through special ed. It's incredibly complicated and hard to predict what your special ed population will look like from year to year. So we are working with Dr. Goodrich on that right now.
That doesn't include, Ms. Hall, that does not include the additional stuff on that previous
Nothing from the
page,
governor's
which
draft.
is about $1 million if we get
It's
it.
it's a little over $1 million, and we never include that because we don't know.
Understood.
Yeah,
Understood.
so no, it does not.
But it could
include
have
that.
an impact.
Right, and if we were to get, final numbers before it's due, that'd be wonderful. I don't see that happening because it hasn't happened.
The first two will probably get, right?
We'll get something as my guess. I don't know for sure what it'll be.
Bigger one, less certain.
Actually, I feel like if I had to guess, I would say we would get the adequacy for sure, which is the bigger number.
Okay,
But
thank you.
I have no say in that, so that's my hope. So it doesn't include those increases. It does include the additional debt service for the $15 million bond we will be taking in 2025. And as I mentioned, I increased the adequacy funding, and we also reprojected our PSERS and Social Security reimbursement from the state now that we've got some projections in for wages for 25, 26. Next slide. So our primary cost drivers, which are not unusual, is salaries and benefits. We did settle the teachers' contract, so we do have a set amount that we know that we are going to increase the CBA. Our benefits, we saw some increase. The PSERS rate went from 33.9 to 34, small, but still an increase. And our medical benefits were trending at a 15% increase with our renewal. So that does impact that quite a bit. We had 850,000. Yes.
So the 3.68 million in salaries and benefits, that obviously includes the new collective bargaining agreement.
Correct.
What assumptions are built in there for support staff, administration, and Act 93?
So we mirror what's in the CBA for budgetary purposes.
Okay. Thank you.
We have an $850,000 increase in student transportation costs that is primarily driven by the contractual increase. And I think we added one van replacement. We have 1.8 million in for a new elementary science program in our curriculum budget. Special education services are always increasing. And just a reminder, we have no more ESSR funding to offset any of that.
Is that 1.8 million a one-time cost?
So, we're currently piloting a couple programs, like our other, programs. It's a 6-year, cost. So it's a one-time cost that will go, 6 years worth of, materials, for the program.
So it'd be 1.8 million for this coming year.
We don't know the exact amount yet. We don't know which program we're going to recommend. That's just a placeholder right now until we can come to the board and share our experiences with the pilot and what the cost would be. So it's at the high end.
If you're saying
just to make sure
that
we know.
1.8 million would last for 6 years,
It's a 6-year.
so it'll be about 300,000 a year. But we'd incur all the costs in year one.
You have to pay
We
for it.
can't base that out.
Correct.
We have to pay it all up front.
That's how you get them, when you do large purchasing from curricular programming, that's how you get the best value on the front end by doing a multi-year contract. So this is the ballpark high number. And so we would work depending on what comes from any recommendations to look at what are potential options, what resources are truly needed versus optional to be able to bring something back. So that number should fluctuate.
Could we spread it out and pay a little more over
Well,
6 years?
We don't even know what the program's going to be yet, so it's hard to
Right.
tell you any hard costs at this point. We're putting a placeholder in there, knowing that the state has changed their steel standards and that we're going to have to adopt a program for the elementary program, which is over the 6-year cycle. We'll bring more to you
Okay.
when we're recommending.
I understand, but if we're short 2.5 million and that's 1.8 million of it, that's a big deal.
Mr. Maris, I think though, if you think about that's this year's curriculum cycle expenditure for science. Last year, it was the ELA curriculum at a big chunk. The year before that, or 2 years
Okay.
before, it was the
I
mathematics.
understand.
So we're doing these big chunks for different curriculum areas on a cycle so that we're not doing that big number for all of them at one time.
Understood.
As we're
Grant, you,
In fairness, Mr. Mills, I agree with your point. I think what we could do, and I commend Dr. Dandridge for negotiating it in the way that it sounds like you are, where we are saving money. What we could do to eliminate the budgetary impact or reduce the budgetary impact, pull 1.6 million from reserves, pay for it upfront in a way that's budget neutral, and then over the next 5 years, put an extra 200,000 back into reserves each year. In other words, we can borrow the money from ourselves to pay for it. That way it's not built into the budget and increasing each year.
Right. But, and I'll get to this, not to burst your bubble, but the Act One index is
I'm
projected.
sorry.
I said, and I don't want to burst your bubble, but the Act One index is projected to go down. So that might present an issue trying to push expenses out. So we can look at that as we do subsequent.
Right, but we all know what happens. If we take 1.8 million now and do it upfront, then that's just gonna live there, and it's going to be this 1.8 million dollars that rolls over.
No, no, we build that from zero every year. So it's whatever is, it's planned
I'm
out.
just trying to get where it sounds like Dr. Dandridge wants to be, where we can pay for it this year, but not have a compounding impact in future years. An easy way to do it is to borrow that money from ourselves and then put it back incrementally over each year of the program.
I guess I have to ask, why
We
would there be a
can.
company pays for it? We don't have to. It's not that we're gonna pay $1.8 million next year, then $1.8 million the following year. It's paid for and bought for.
Because right now, we're looking at a $2.5 million deficit, and to Mr. Maris's point,
Well, I
1.8
understand.
million is 70% of the projected deficit. If we can reduce that, I mean,
Yeah, I think we're having this conversation a little prematurely. I think we need to wait until we get a contract and we can look at that and negotiate that and then maybe discuss in a little more detail. Maybe it'll come back with what we want and maybe we can negotiate. But until we know that, I mean, we can talk about this till we're blue in the face and we're not going to have any real answers. So I'd suggest we just hold it. And then when we get a recommendation, and get a contract, then we look at it. If that's okay.
I mean, the reality is they're going to discount it based on the time value of money, depending on how much money we're earning and some of our money. It may or may not make sense to do the upfront high cost. But you're right, we got to get more details.
We're not there. Okay, next slide. So just breaking out the various categories like we typically do, so you can see where the increases are. Salaries are up 3.29%. That does not include any column movement that should be happening here in March, so we may revise those again for HEA. Our benefits are up in total 3.57, even though the medical is up. Some other things are slightly down. Transportation is up 3.65, 3.5% is contractual. Special ed, we're still reviewing. We don't know where that's going to land. And the rest is other expenses are typically debt service, and it's down a little bit from the 24 actual because that was the year that we put 5 million into cap reserve straight out of the budget. Next slide. Same information, just to give you an idea, our money every year, it's the same story. Salary and benefits are a little over 70% of our budget. So that's where the bulk of the expense for the district comes in. Next slide. This is what I was speaking to a few minutes ago, the projected Act 1 index from the IFO, and then we projected what the adjusted would be. And so the same chart that I present probably every presentation. So we have the 24-25. This is based on the $210 million borrowing for the high school. What it might look like if we were, to stop today and say, this is our expenses. We are continuing to work on that, but just to give you an idea, we're still within the allowable, but it doesn't leave a lot on the table, but it does come in within the adjusted index. And then just gives you an idea of what that looks like for the further years out and how much money that leaves. So if we were to do 263, we're okay next year if we were in the same boat, but the next year and the 2 years following that, it's a lot lower. So I just want to be mindful of that. If we push anything off, that it may not become feasible to make everything work. Last slide. So just in terms of next steps, this is when we are scheduled to review continuously, is we're going to continue to look and review and refine our revenue and expense projections as we get more information. That being revenue side from updated real estate information, so we know what our local taxes will look like. If we get anything from the state, that's a bonus, not likely. And we will continue to go through our expenses with a fine tooth comb and really look at where our spikes are and ask some questions and see, what we can do differently. So I'll be back at the March committee meeting with a budget update for all revenue and expenditures. On April 8th, we will have a final budget presentation and have a discussion regarding what the tax increase could be. On the 13th, we will adopt the resolution to display and advertise the final budget as required by PDE. And we are scheduled to adopt a final budget on June 10th, which is in advance of the June 30th deadline from the state. Any questions at this point?
So have we gone through the process of trying to reduce expenses with all different departments? Is that in progress, or have we ever done that, or?
So individuals
Can
from
I-
the department standpoint were asked to put their budgets in that were either at or lower than what it was for this current year. So it was already reduced an additional 5% from the prior year. So they were
Okay.
already down. So
Okay.
what Mrs. Hall shared earlier is that everything has been rolled up. And so they're going back through things to look at salary, benefits, special ed, all of those areas that are some of the high drivers. At that same time, Dr. Musser, Dr. Dandridge are also going back and just reviewing those other budgets with those department leaders to make sure that anything that's in there is an absolute must. If things were able to come out, if they purchase something this year in place of next year, budgets can go down. So we're kind of working through that whole process. And so that's what Mrs. Hall and her team are doing. As she shared earlier, we're talking about tens of thousands of line items of the budget. So from a first pass, as I shared with Mrs. Hall, a lot of great work has gone into this, and I think it's a good starting point as to it could have been a lot worse.
So, I mean, last year I came in at 3.5 to start, so this is better.
Yep.
Just to give you, and we didn't end up there. We ended up 3.5 overall, including a new debt service. So there is work to be done, but you have to get all the information in first to then start to peel it back.
So the Governor Shapiro, is there any chance he'll miraculously be done earlier this year?
If I knew that.
Right, and
It's not him.
That'd be some,
It's the,
It's
yeah, it's
not.
not
Right.
him.
What's
He-
that?
He put out his budget proposal. Now it's the
Right
work.
now
of
it's-
I'm just saying, we usually find out about it July, August, we got to adopt our budget before then. which is
Correct.
unfortunate.
Right, so the
Which
House
is-
of
is
Representatives and the
always gonna
Senate
happen.
have to do their part as they work through the appropriations committees and they try and iron out budgets working with the governor's office. We're hopeful that it's done sooner, but it's going to be a continuous discussion around how to fund public education. So the more conversations that we can have, and I know there's some legislative meetings coming up over the next week that several of you will be attending. More conversations and discussions need to happen with our legislators to keep things moving.
All right, any other questions for Mrs. Hall or any of us on the budget? All right, hearing none, we're going to move on to the review of the contracts. They will be on the agenda for the March, I believe, 11th meeting for approval. You can see you have a contract spreadsheet there. So if you haven't had a chance to look at that, take a few minutes to take a look at that now. And if you have any questions or discussions, we can talk about them.
I would just point out, under the Bank Creek one, the room rental is going away, so that will actually be $500 less than what it says there.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Keener.
I just have a question on I think it's the last one, the Meadows. Is that just a placeholder agreement in the
Yes.
event that we would need it?
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
I think it's a 3-year, so it was just up.
Okay.
Any other questions or do you need a little more time? Everybody good? All right, I'm going to take that as we don't have any more questions. And so you'll see this on the, I believe, March 11th agenda for approval. And the last thing that we have in the Finance Committee is the MOU for the SRO. We've talked about this. I didn't see any language in here that differed from what we had talked about, but if you've had a chance to review this agreement, does anybody have any concerns with this? Because I'm going to ask for a motion in a second and then a vote on this.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Keener.
Second,
Thank you, Mr. Maris. All those in favor? Those opposed? Anybody online?
Mr. Wagner was. He had to get off.
Mr. Wagner's online, I think.
All right, that's going to pass
He's in
with
favor.
7.
He's in favor.
Okay, 8-0. You have the schedule for upcoming meetings and the last part, I'll just need a motion to adjourn in a
so
second.
moved.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? All right, that's going to be at least 7-0, maybe 8 if Pat decided to vote. All right, thank you. Have a good evening.